I already reviewed Legendary Pictures' Godzilla 2014, but it was a first impression, right after having seen it. Now that time has passed, I'd like to say a little more about it before the new Japanese one, Godzilla Resurgence, comes out. When I first saw it, I was very enthusiastic, even though it was a Hollywood film, not from Toho. It was the first Godzilla movie of any kind in 10 years, so I accepted it. I mentioned the last time that I thought the monsters, the Mutos, didn't look very original. They reminded me too much of the monster from Cloverfield, Super 8, and Gauss from the Gamera films. I also mentioned how the Mutos seemed to steal the focus away from Godzilla, and how every time the monsters would meet, they would cut away and save all the action until the very end. I wasn't really in love with this film, but I said that overall, it was a welcome return to a franchise that had been dormant for too long. But what I meant to say was this. We all complained about the first American version from TriStar. Now that they answered our complaints, Godzilla now looks like Godzilla and he breathes fire at the very end. So now I feel bad to complain because now it sounds like I'm being picky. Well, the truth is, this movie raised other problems. Before I get into that, first let me talk about what I liked. The opening credits. It got me from the very start. With all that 50s stock footage, it feels just like a classic monster movie. But the TriStar version also had the same kind of opening credits. Similar. They both used the same bomb blast, the famous clip that was used in lots of old monster movies. Too many to count. So actually, both films begin very well. The music is also very good. I wish they'd bring back the traditional Godzilla theme, though. Does any franchise nowadays keep its theme anymore? But still, excellent music. The first act is great. The tension, the build-up, the nuclear plant being destroyed, it's a great lead-in to a monster that's not Godzilla. But anyway, the actor who plays the main character's father, the engineer at the nuclear plant, he was fantastic. His name's Bryan Cranston. He seems to be famous mainly in TV, but I didn't know who he was. This was my first time seeing him, so I had a totally fresh opinion, and I thought he was excellent. But he's only in the first act, and without him, there's no other awesome characters, so the whole movie goes downhill. Actually, Dr. Serizawa, played by Ken Watanabe, was good too. The cinematography. There's some really good camera choices. Gareth Edwards had the right idea to always shoot the monsters from human viewpoints. He never puts the camera where a person could never actually be. This makes the monsters seem more real. Dating back to the first Godzilla, the shots where he looks best is when you're looking up at him or seeing him from a distance. They got that right. Now, what I didn't like. Killing off the best character, I already mentioned. His son and the girlfriend, they are not interesting. I didn't really care that much about these characters. They're bland and boring. I didn't hate them either. I just thought that they were flat and too low-key. I don't know. They just didn't do much for me. Godzilla having nothing to do with the first act. He only becomes relevant after the Muto hatches. Godzilla appearing 1 hour into the film. That is too late, and finally when he does appear, it cuts away. Godzilla's look, I hate to compare, but it's better than the TriStar version. Even though he looks like Godzilla this time, when he roars, the mouth is too reminiscent of the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. You know what I mean? When you see those computer-generated jaws opening, it's beginning to look really stock and cliche, like anything that's close to a dinosaur needs to copy Jurassic Park. Speaking of which, obviously it's CG. That's just the way it is nowadays. People think it's better than rubber suits because you can do a whole lot more with it. Yes, rubber suits are more challenging. Rubber suits can look fake, but when they look good, they look really good because there's something actually there. And I don't think CG looks any better. The same way you can tell a rubber suit is fake, I can tell CG is fake. Even if you do a really good job with it, my eyes are still telling me it's a computer-generated image, like a video game. So what's more fake here, really? The destruction. Godzilla doesn't destroy enough buildings. Sure, lots of stuff gets wrecked when he's fighting the Mutos, but it's never the way it was in the old movies, where Godzilla is scary because he's going to demolish everything in sight. That's where a Hollywood film with an enormous budget could improve on what was done before. Let's see the full magnitude of what this creature is capable of doing. We see him causing tidal waves, and that's great. Godzilla should be a force of nature, but with Godzilla hardly in the scene and just the tidal waves, I feel like we're watching a film about a tsunami. They took the natural disaster part a little bit too literal. Cutting away when the Muto reaches Las Vegas, and then again when the two monsters are about to fight for the second time, unacceptable. It's fine to focus on the humans. The humans are the ones that ground it in reality to make it relatable, but you need to have the monster scenes too. It made no sense to me to tease you for almost 2 hours like it was a joke or something, and then give us everything at the end. The dark cinematography. Okay, even though I liked some of what they did with the camera work, too much of it is shot at night. Most of the film has a dark, murky look. Even during the finale, the whole thing is at night, and sometimes you can hardly tell what's going on. Especially on my TV screen, it looks bad. There's not much contrast, everything looks washed out. Although I watched the 3D version too, and that looks a lot better. There's too many scenes of soldiers running around. What is the preoccupation with soldiers running around? It's not interesting, especially the part where they're all jumping out of the sky. It really dwells on that. The music is going on and everything. Whenever I'm watching that part, all I'm thinking is, why is this the dramatic focus of the film right now? Just, I'm like, yeah, okay. Something else should be happening in its place right now. You can still focus on human drama, but have it be more closely related to the threat of Godzilla. Perfect example is on the train when a young boy is separated from his parents. Not much really happens. He gets back to his parents and it's resolved rather quickly. But how about expanding on that? What about instead of soldiers jumping from the sky, how about seeing the boy trying to escape Godzilla? Maybe the parents find him on the train and they're reaching out for him just as Godzilla's tail splits the train in two and they have to safely rescue him from one half of the train as it dangles on the elevated tracks. Make us really want to see him get saved. Moving on. About Godzilla's screen time, I know if you count up the minutes of how much you actually see Godzilla, it's probably comparable to some of the older Godzilla movies. I'd imagine, without having actually counted, you probably see Godzilla just as much as you do in Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, for example. But it's not about what those movies did, it's about what this movie should have done. It's about how you pace the monster scenes, how you move from a dramatic scene to an action scene and back to a dramatic scene. How do you string everything together into a strong narrative that holds your attention? And this was very unbalanced. Quite honestly, I find the majority of the film to be boring. From the theater to seeing it at home, the experience has been just the same. It starts out good, then after the Muto appears, it begins slowly going downhill. By the 1 hour mark, we desperately need Godzilla to show up. He shows up, big applause moment, and then he's gone, and that last hour really drags. After all the stuff with the soldiers, I feel mentally drained, and by the time the fight comes with the monsters at the very end, it feels too late. I'm exhausted. We're always going to compare it to the TriStar version and say how much better it was than that. As far as sticking close to the character of Godzilla, yes, it's better. Otherwise, I hate to say this, and I know this is going to be really shocking to hear, but there are some things about the TriStar version that are better. I rewatched it recently, and there's a lot more practical effects than you'd remember. All I could remember was a CG lizard running around, but if you actually watch it again and look closer, there's a lot of great miniature work. Lots of the military vehicles are actual models being blown up, and if you think back to Independence Day, the buildings that the spaceships blew up were also miniatures, so it's not surprising that they were still using those kind of effects on Godzilla. There were even a few shots where it was a man in a suit, especially during the third act where the whole movie turns into Attack of the Mutant Raptors. Lots of the baby Godzillas were either suit actors or animatronics. Godzilla appears much sooner. It never leaves you hanging for so long. It's paced much better. When we need to feel suspense, there's suspense. Whenever there needs to be action, there's action. It balances it rather than backloading all the action to the end. Godzilla has much more screen time. Even though it's not the Godzilla you want to see, it's Zilla, it at least delivers all the fun action that you would expect. The only problem was that the movie was called Godzilla. If only they named it something else, if it was a completely different movie, it wouldn't have been such a huge backlash. They're both totally different kind of movies. They're polar opposites. The TriStar version is very silly in tone. It's only trying to be a big spectacle, a summer blockbuster, with a lot of action and humor. It doesn't try to be anything more than what it is. Think of it as a follow-up to Independence Day, which is exactly what it is. The Legendary Pictures version is a much more serious movie. It doesn't joke around as much, even though at its basics, it's still a monster movie, not to mention it actually has Godzilla. I don't feel right saying the TriStar version is a better movie because it's so goofy and that the monster doesn't represent what we all envision as Godzilla, but after watching both of them back to back, I can't help but admit that it's a lot more entertaining, and I never thought I'd say that. Now I want to talk about what I would have done to make the Legendary Pictures version better, because it's not that often when movie critics are actually constructive and try to give specifics. So here you go. If I were able to alter anything, here's what I would do. In my version, the Mutos have no larva form. We never saw the larva form anyway, so why do we care? Instead, they hatch in the winged formation. In the Philippines, instead of finding a Godzilla skeleton, it's a Muto skeleton. Next to it is a recently hatched egg, sort of like the one they find that's dormant, but instead this one hatched right after the cave opened up. Natives witnessed it leave its tomb, but are too frightened to speak of it, similar to the natives in the original 1954 Godzilla. Serizawa notes that the egg only hatched days ago, then turns his attention to a giant hole in the earth where the creature flew off. Same as in the real movie, except the Muto made no path because it's not a larva. Then the nuclear plant in Japan is destroyed. We keep everything unseen, the same way it is in the movie, for the most part, except instead of it being the Muto that destroyed the plant, it's Godzilla. We only need some kind of brief glimpse of Godzilla here, the kind of bullshit they did in the later acts when they kept cutting away. This is the time to do that. 15 years do not need to pass. We never need to see the main character as a young boy. Instead, he's already grown up. The awesome guy, Bryan Cranston, playing Joe Brody, he's actually witnessed Godzilla destroy the plant, and just the sight of Godzilla alone has driven him insane. He's trying to prove that it's not a natural disaster and that the authorities are covering it up, just like in the real movie. He and his son go back to the site of the plant and find they have a Muto egg, not a cocoon. The egg hatches and the Muto gets loose. Next is the exposition scene. We learn that after the Muto hatched in the Philippines, it traveled to Japan to nest at the nuclear plant, not to make a cocoon. But Godzilla showed up and killed it, destroying the plant in the process. It left an egg behind, similar to Godzilla vs. Mothra. This is where Serizawa talks about Godzilla restoring nature's balance. They even have fuzzy classified surveillance footage of everything happening, so we do get to see some footage of Godzilla laying the smack down. And instead of 2 Mutos, there's only 1. I mean, why is it always got to be about breeding and hatching other monsters? You know, like they did that in the TriStar version. Can we ever get off of that? Then in Honolulu, when Godzilla shows up to fight the Muto, this happens 45 minutes in, not an hour. We don't cut away from the fight, we actually show it. It can be dark and rainy, but we still need to see something. It can cut to people reacting, keeping the human stories happening parallel with the monsters, but never cut away completely and lose the momentum. Joe Brody, keep him alive. The whole plot should be about his son trying to reunite with him. Take what they did in the first act, about him trying to get his father back, and elaborate on that. The young boy on the train who's trying to get back to his parents, or something to that effect, could be another subplot. And as I mentioned, all the bullshit with the soldiers, lose it. In San Francisco, Godzilla vs. the Muto should be happening about 1 hour 25 minutes in. It should take place during the early morning hours so we can see the monsters against the rising sun brightly lit in all their glory. Many buildings should be demolished. It must be a spectacle. And by the 1 hour 45 or 50 minute mark, the credits should start scrolling. Whew. Anyway, I look forward to see what direction they take with the sequel and for Godzilla Resurgence, Toho's comeback. I hope at least one of these movies gets it right and delivers not what we expect, but to surpass our expectations, to fully live up to Godzilla's potential and take the franchise to all new heights.